Hey guys, Doug Giles here, little Warriors and Wildmen action. Rich, I see you in the camera, buddy. How you doing, big dog?
What's up, Doug? It's good to see you in person via technology. What's up, man?
Yeah, it's been a long time since I rock and roll. I like your shirt, man. Saints and sinners.
Saints and sinners. Sometimes
man.
they're the same person.
Yeah, and like I told you when we're getting warmed up for this, even saints act like sinners, Richard, when they don't have their customary dinners. And ain't nobody get hangry like an evangelical gets hangry when you don't feed them at the proper time. Didn't in the New Testament they had some kind of blowout about these old ladies that weren't getting food, and the apostles were drug into that crap, and they're like, "We ain't got time for bronchitis," and they appointed Stephen to oversee it and referee these chicks. This is all over food. Here you are talking about the resurrected Son of God. And these nutty chicks are bitching about food.
Well, they had problems with that even during the celebration of communion, the Lord's Supper, and they would come together and have dinner. They fought about everything. Like they were typical Christians fighting about everything that didn't matter.
And Paul said, "Hey, kind of ease back on that communion wine, because some of you guys are knocking back a little too much of the sangria, if you know what I mean." And to me, I dig that. It wasn't like I don't know how communion wine has morphed into frickin' Welch's grape juice. It's not what the Son of God served. And
I know. Did you know it was actually a business model? And Welch's is the first one to come up with grape juice like that, and they marketed it to churches in America. And that started the process. It was driven by capitalism, like every other decision was money, even in the church. Anyway, I'll send you the article. We could post the link, whatever.
Here's something about, and I know it's not our topic today, but like I was talking to this one pastor of a church in another city, and I was like, really, dude, grape juice, that's not what they had at the Last Supper. It's not what's going to be served in the marriage supper of the Lamb. So why are you hitting us with knee-high or Welch's during the sacraments? He goes, well, he said, you see, Enrich, this I still don't get it. He goes, you see, some people have problems with alcohol. It's like, listen, we're not talking about a goblet here. This is not some goldfish bowl of Cabernet that we're downing as we celebrate Christ's sacrifice on our behalf. It's a thimbleful of wine. Yeah. And to me, Rich, if a thimble full of wine sends you into a 4-day bender, then I don't think your problem's alcoholism. I think there's there's some San Andreas faults that haven't been rectified.
Some Beelzebub going on. Yeah. What I also find interesting is that when you go to celebrate communion, I mean, you think it's one of the most incredible things the church can do. We're remembering, we're looking forward. It's reflection, anticipation, self-examination. It's like I'm starting to sound like a preacher. Everything's rhyming. But I think that it's weird that we do that, and then we pass out a little plastic cup with a pre-made top that you undo, and then there's the wafer inside of it, and then you unpeel that. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of ready to go back old school. People get mad about
what
the
are
Catholic
we in
Church.
Kindergarten?
Yeah, the Catholic Church uses a chalice, and they use a purifier and they wipe it and stuff, and people get bent about that. And I get it. People don't want to drink after other people and stuff, but I don't know, man. There's got to be somewhere in between the two, because to me, kind of a little bit's lost there. But whatever.
Yeah, but
anyway,
again,
go ahead.
Like you said, man, it's there's a lot of money to be made with that little wafer and chaser. So you got to have the little prepackaged.
And I'm sure some Christians own that business. So
it just does not have the soul that I think that was part and parcel, obviously, of Christ's communion with the brothers. Before. Yeah. He took one for the team, and I don't think it has the same kind of vibe that was going down in the early church either. And but again,
who are we, right?
Yeah. Who are we to judge? Hey, speaking about judging, and the Warriors and Wildmen listener know this, is that Warriors and Wildmen is all about making masculinity great again. We're all about putting brains and balls on believers, and we think that the classic archetype of the male imago is personified in provider, protector, hunter, and hero, with Christ as our captain. And as you well know, the listeners, masculinity, well, it's It's not the soup du jour of the sassy secularist in postmodern America. And Rich, right now, and we're not making this crap up. Some of the guys might have seen it on Fox News. I know they were talking about it. Tucker Carlson was the other night. The American Psychologist Association has now deemed, Rich, from on high, that traditional masculinity is a pathology in need of a cure. So that's what's coming, boys and girls.
I'm going to throw fits. I'm going to throw fits on this episode because I'm sick of hearing this garbage about, and you know, in the article I was reading on it, Doug, listen to this quote. I think this quote sums up the article. Let me read this quote to you real quick. There's a couple in here that are pretty crazy, but the research suggests applying the same kind of gender-sensitive lens that psychologists have for decades been applying to women and gender nonconforming groups. The main thrust of subsequent research is that traditional masculinity, marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is on the whole harmful, the guidelines propose. And then, check this out. And curing, this is it. Doug, are you ready to get fired up?
Fire me up, brother.
And curing toxic male behavior is really the path to fixing everything, argues McDermott. If we can change men, we can change the world. If they, my God.
Yeah, if they can take men and move them from providers, protectors, hunters, and heroes into weepy therapeutic tinkerpots, then you know what? The world will be changed, and it'll suck ass. That's what will happen.
Yeah, and
hey, listen,
the
Rich,
problem isn't that. Go ahead. I'm gonna blow up.
Before you ignite, let me let the brethren in. I'm talking about you, those who are in Christ's community. Way back when, like 2,600 years ago, there was a prophet named Isaiah. He said, Rich, that Isaiah was saying that Israel wasn't paying attention to God's commandments. They didn't give a flibberty gibbet about what the prophets or the law said they had stiff necks and they walked with arrogance and lustful passion. And God's like, how can I kick their ass? I used tumors in the past, hemorrhoids once, frogs, fire. You know what? Here's how I'm going to waylay Israel. I'm going to remove the mighty man and the warrior from their midst. And you know who's going to lead them? Women and capricious lads. When that happened, the gates were torn down on that nation. Obviously, they didn't have anybody to protect it. And the enemies of Israel came rolling in like thunder and waylaid that nation. The way that God did it's like, listen, you're going to be little bitches. You're going to be somebody who doesn't pay attention to my prophets and my law. Then guess what? I'm going to strip the mighty man and the warrior, the elder and the wise from your midst. And here comes the enemy. And they waylaid Israel for, I don't know how, I think like 20 to 40 years. The removal of the warrior was a curse upon a disobedient people.
Boom. And then what are we supposed to do with that? We're supposed to ignore it because we don't have to honor God. We don't have to honor God with nature. We don't have to honor God with our body. We don't have to honor God with the way we live. We don't have to honor God. It's all just using nice words. Just use nice words, Doug.
I can't.
You're not being nice.
I never had a dream of being nice. I'm not sitting there when I was a young child.
I don't want to hear anything about Isaiah. That's Old Testament, and he's not being nice. And Jesus was way nicer than that, Doug. And the epitome of Christianity is as nice as we can get. If we can turn all of the men into pussies, then we will be real Christians.
Woo! I feel my testicles shrinking as you speak, Rich. It's interesting. Let's go back to what you said and what this guy with the American Psychologist Association said was the main thrust of their subsequent research into traditional masculinity. He said, Rich, and you and I define it a little differently, but I think
he's a wuss. The guy that wrote that, he's a wuss.
Yeah, I can picture him now drinking, a soy latte with pumpkin spice on top of it from that long ass green straw, just wailing away on it, buddy.
Not the straw, because one turtle got one in his nose.
Right. Tell the Chinese are dumping all their trash in the ocean before you attack.
That's racist.
My grandson's straw. Damn it.
You're not a good Christian. You're talking bad about turtles, and now you're a racist.
Turtle soup's great. I love turtles. Me
too. And then you can use the shell to like store things.
All right, let's go back to numbnuts here. The research led by Omar Yusuf. Sounds Muslim to me. Could not be. Well, but I guarantee, Rich, there's two entities, in my humble opinion, that dig. I'm talking about they love the pussification of the American male, and it's leftists because men who would be men are difficult to handle. And number two, it's Islam, because the more they can weaken our masculinity in our internal resolve and fortitude to be the provider, protector, hunter, and hero, the more that they can cue up their nefarious schemes and be successful at it. So as we become pussified, they become encouraged and ramp up their attack. And they love nothing more than death. I'm talking about the jihadist and the Islamist. And if they get it their way, our young, dumb, little tinkerpot neuter generation will love Pepsi more than they will the will to war and fight for their right to party.
Boom.
All right, let's go back to Omar Yusuf's characteristics of traditional masculinity. Stoicism, okay? He says that's bad. Stoicism's bad? Listen, I tell you what, there's a lot of Stoic aspects of Christ and the apostles and prophets. It's maybe not... Maybe it's not parlayed like some of the great Stoics in time would what's the word I'm looking for?
Promote.
Would define their terms, but Stoicism means that you're just chill. You're chill when you get bad news. You're chill when you get good news. You're not effervescent and ebullient that think that whatever happened to you in the positive sense is going to continue forever and ever and ever, and I'll never see a trial. Jesus is like, you got to get sober, man, because you will see a trial. Mm-hmm. So rejoice, but take it down a notch and be cool and thankful. Also, when you're grieving in dark times, you got to be stoic, man, and not become a desperate little monkey. And you got to maintain that cool, funky bottom line faith base where you know that this plate of shit that just got handed to you is not going to last forever. That on that horizon, God's going to come again. To me, that's stoicism in a nutshell. You're not rattled by anything, highs or lows. How's that bad, man?
And
How's that
it's
bad?
not bad. And you know what? I've always admired men that were cool like that. I call it cool, not cool like Fonzie cool, but cool like even keeled. They just roll with it. Very under control. I've always admired that because I'm not so much like that. I'm more
Rich
blow
runs
up.
hot.
Yeah. But I find that when things are serious and it's real problems, I actually do way better. But I admire men that are like that because it's a great example. I think it's a great example of self-control. It's a great example of faith. And it's also, you can't be a leader if you're throwing a fit every time, even your family. And these men are walking around throwing fits like crybabies in front of their kids. Right. And then they wonder why nobody follows them because you're a little female dog. That's why.
Yeah. In my book, Pussification, I open up one of the chapters.
What's the name of your book?
Pussification.
Okay, yes. Thanks. The effeminization of the American male.
That's it. That's the subtitle. Okay. But I open up one of the chapters with this guy named George. I can't remember this cat's last name, but he's in Britain. And Rich, sometimes he's got a female flatmate, and sometimes he finds himself at certain times of the month actually having his menstruation with his female roommate. And he said it is not a weird thing for you to be parasympathetic with the maladies that beset somebody who's close to you, in particular, a roommate. And so Georgie would have he would have all of the moody
symptoms
stuff that attends that what's the word I'm looking for? That ordeal once a month. And he even called in sick, and he told his boss he couldn't work because he was menstruating. And I tell you what, man, if that was my employee, it's like, menstruating. That's not the worst of your problems. You're fired.
You know what? You know what the worst of your problems is? You crazy, son. What you talking about?
Right.
What you talking about?
So stoicism, I don't find stoicism a problem at all, man. I think to be chilled under pressure, to be elated properly when good things come your way, and not to be a rouged and giddy lipstick American Idol hopeful.
Yep.
When you get good news, but like Churchill, you take it with magnanimity or magnanimously, or some other word I'm trying to make up right now. Again, defeat, you're cool. You know that it ain't over. You're not down for the count. Victory, hey, you're grateful, but you got your eyes on the horizon because you know that the lion comes around seeking somebody to devour. Mm-hmm. And we're either coming out of a storm or we're going into one. So you always got to be Paul Newman and play a true cool hand. I don't find what Omar Yusuf finds in stoicism. I don't find that something that I need to have purged from my body, purged from my psyche. Matter of fact, like you said, Rich, I think that kind of attitude, that stoicism that has saved a lot of nations and a lot of people from going nuts and into despair and into insanity, I think that needs to be mainlined into the male collective instead of purged from it. So
no, they need to wear little short shorts and a little tight tank top with no muscles in their body whatsoever, and then run around and throw a fit and go lay on their wife's lap and cry, because that's what men are supposed to do, because we're all the same now.
One of the great Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, I think one of the most amazing quotes, something that's very biblical, and something that's gotten me through some rough patches, Rich, is the way that Aurelius looked at obstacles. And he said, listen, he said, that thing that you think is a big impediment to life and growth, he said, in just a beautiful little synopsis of his view of trials and difficulty, he said, that obstacle is your way. So instead of seeing, this looming threat of death or destruction or mayhem or whatever as this thing from Satan, he basically said, listen, that's a gift if you play it correctly. Mm-hmm. And that came from a Stoic. Now,
there you go.
Help me, Mr. Dr. Yusuf. Tell me where that shit's bad, will you? I think it's great. I think people ought to read the Stoics. I think you ought to pay attention to the Gospels when Christ is preaching. Take the Stoicism in Matthew chapter 6, Rich. They're in an economic downturn. It's during a drought. Jesus is he's looking at all the cats that he's preaching to. It's getting late. Everybody's getting hungry. And he launches into one of the greatest Stoic diatribes that I think came from his divine lips. He said, listen, you see that sparrow over there? He said, yeah, that thing's not fretting. It's not worried about where it's going to get its food. Not worried about where it's going to get a nest. And he's like, I think they sell like a dozen of those for like a penny. And look over there at that flower. You see that flower over there? That thing's beautiful. Solomon in all of his glory.
In all of his splendor and glory wasn't arrayed as such as these.
Dressed like that. And you know what? That thing pops up and fades away. Now let me ask you a question. Okay? And he knows these people are chewing their fingernails down to the frickin' nub. He goes, are you more valuable than a sparrow? Do you think God cares for that flower more than he does you chucklehead of little faith? That's Stoicism in a nutshell, man. Yep. And if that's bad, then you know what? Call me Bad Boy Doug.
Bad Boy Doug.
I'm going to call you Bad Boy Rich.
What was the next one on their list of comedy?
Yeah, competitiveness.
Oh, you know what? God. No problem. Let's take that out. Let's not become champions. Let's not develop our inner drive. Let's not put our kids in sports. Let's not compete in business. Let's not compete with each other. Let's not go out and shoot, Doug, and be competitive in shooting. You can be friends with somebody. You don't have to hate their guts. Competitiveness is great, man. It develops character. And it develops this thing in people, Doug, that I like to call try.
Right.
You got to have some try. A lot of people, they don't want to fail, so they're afraid. They don't have no try. They don't want to be measured. My sons and I went to watch a friend of mine in a powerlifting competition, and a kid went up there to lift, Doug, and he was overweight, and he was kind of a goofy kid. I'm not trying to pick on him, but he went out there and he had on one of those compression suits, and he went and grabbed the weight, and my boys are kind of smiling like, look at this kid, And then the kid lifts the weight up and he's trying to get it, and the whole place is into it because they want him to make it, and he's like struggling for it. Even the announcer who's supposed to be announcing the thing is like, come on, you got it, And this kid lifts it, gets it, everybody starts cheering, the lights go green, he drops it, the crowd's cheering, he never even looks at the people, Doug. He bends down, he looks at the weight, and he goes, yes, like that, and he walks out. And they said, ladies and gentlemen, that was his personal best. It wasn't a record for anybody else. And my sons looked at me and go, Dad, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And you don't want to know why? Because he had to take the guts to put his name on that line, to pay the entrance fee, to put on that outfit, walk out there in front of the crowd, and you can make fun of him, but guess what? He's got some try in him. He's out there, man. And he did the best that he had ever done. On payday, Doug, on game day, he brought his best. That's competitiveness, bringing out the champion inside of you. And my boys left, and they kept talking about that kid. He didn't lift anywhere near the amount of the weight that the people that were winning, but they were like, man, that was so awesome. That's what competitiveness, this is a great thing. And we're trying to take it out and make these men such pansies.
Yeah, and if and if people think we're full of crap, and our country doesn't share, the planet doesn't share our opinion, then why do all the movies that highlight, like you talk about, this underdog who nobody thought was capable of doing what he did? Why do the movies constantly spotlight that kind of competitive behavior, and why do they overwhelmingly succeed in the box office week after week, after month after month, after year? I
think I know why.
It's
because God. Yeah, you were going to say it. Go ahead. You had it.
Yeah, it's hardwired into us.
God made us
by
like
God
that.
and nature.
God made us like that, and
men.
Yeah.
Yeah, men have always looked to compete, and if we ban competition, they're still going to look for some ways to compete.
Doug, you know what the oldest form of competition is? Just think about sports. It's
what T-shirt contest?
You're right. Well, that wasn't a competition. That was just for funsies.
Yeah, I got a great joke about
the oldest competition. The oldest is running, racing. I mean, you think about guys standing around. Bet you I can beat you to that rock. That's it, right? You know what the second oldest is? Wrestling. I bet I can throw you down. Well, there you go. That stuff didn't pop up last week. It didn't pop up with America and that's Americanism. That's your macho, toxic mass. No, that's from the time that men could run, from the time that they could compete. They've been racing each other and throwing each other on the ground because it's built in, man.
Yeah, and that's what formed this great experiment in self-governance. Like, we don't like you, Snaggletooth King George. We're going to go build our own country. Go try. It's like, all right, F you. Well, F you. And then, boom, we competed. And I believe the UK is like sucking wind right now and trying to free themselves up from the European Union in a great Brexit move, which I think is going to add once again to their competitiveness on the nation stage. But I could be wrong.
Let me interject with my little argument with the guy on Facebook who's a Christian, Doug. You're going to enjoy this. I said, and I have to run. I'm off to record 2 episodes for our Warriors and Wildmen podcast, which I'm sure you would hate. It's about Christian men behaving like men and not conforming to the effeminate American Christian church. It's high testosterone. His response.
Oh, Beauregard.
He said, have fun with that. I'm learning to knit so I can teach my daughter. This is true. This happened, Doug, 1 hour ago. Okay? I'm probably too effeminate for this podcast, but since there is no case to be made for toxic masculinity in the scriptures, I'll let you go ahead and do your thing. I said, yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of other people that can teach her to knit. He said, yeah, but I prefer to spend time with my daughter rather than pawn her off on other people. You do you, homie. I'll stick with loving my daughter enough to learn a skill she wants to learn. And I said, rock on, stud. You don't have to explain yourself to me. He said, nope, I don't need to explain it to you. just what any dad who is reading this to know that masculinity isn't defined by whatever society says, and being sensitive or effeminate is okay because everyone is different. Listen to this. That being a man means caring for those around them in the best way possible, and that God has fearfully and wonderfully made them in a way that is unique to their DNA. They are equally loved and valued by the King, and he has made them to be who they are. If that means they are a tough guy, then by all means. If it means they are poets and musicians, then by all means. If it means they like to knit and bake, then by all means. Men reading this, you are not defined by an ethereal standard set by toxic masculinity. You are defined by the one who created you and longs for your relationship. Insulting, name-calling, and gaslighting is not a true measure of a man. Loving your family well, sacrificial love for your neighbors, empathy, and compassion are marks of a man. And this other guy said to me, Rich, your obsession with both Michelle and Melania's looks is creepy and gross, like stalker level creepy. I hope your wife doesn't know how much you obsess over other women's bodies. And I said, your lack of manliness is creepy and gross. Get out of your mom's basement and come into the light, Tinker Pot.
Now, here's where I'm going to play the devil's advocate with this guy.
Do it.
Because, first of all, spending time with your daughter, great. Knitting would not be my forte. We did it with martial arts, with shark fishing, hunting, and I don't think they ever had Barbies or anything like that. But we spent time together. So okay, I'm with you on the spending time with your daughter. That's great. As long as she's not on Instagram, she's not taking pictures of her vagina and showing them on Snapchat. You're with her. Kudos to you, man, for spending time with your kids, because a lot of people neglect their kids, obsessing on social media and their mistress and other stuff that is cosmically inconsequential.
That's good. But let me throw this one part out there. He's not knitting with his daughter. He's learning to knit so he can teach his daughter to knit.
Here's what I do, Rich.
I call female dog, little female dog. Nope. He's not sitting down with his little daughter knitting and having a tea party. I don't care about that. This dude is sitting on the couch learning to knit because he's a little female dog, and he's doing it, and he's using it as an excuse that he's going to teach his daughter because he wants to sit around and be a chick. No way, dude.
Yeah, unless that knitting turns into some kind of crazy, Giorgio Armani, Hugo Boss type line of epic menswear.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's just knitting, but
if it turns into doilies that
it's
you
not
use
knitting
for coasters,
alone. It's not knitting alone. It's knitting with the full package of what this guy says. It's not.
No,
if you want to knit, I don't care. His whole package. Oh, dude, this dude is.
Let me jump off the knitting stuff.
If he's not gay,
he's in line. So here's another thing that I agree with him, and I have a lot of the wild men types follow me on Instagram, and they did on Facebook till I was banned forever. Here's another thing that I agree with him on, and I think that it does deserve an overcorrection, or a correction rather, is the aspect of poetry, the aspect of the arts. Fancy book learning, as Jed Clampett used to call the thing that Jethro needed when he would go into the 6th grade. Those things get pissed on, man, by a lot of these knuckle draggers. Like, hey man, I think God wants me to put another inch on my bicep. His biceps are bigger than my freaking thigh. It's like, what if God wants you to put another inch on your brain, or maybe your soul?
Yeah.
Or tell me how once again, Mr. not you, Rich, but the guys that have this cartoon version of what masculinity means. Tell me again how poetry is effeminate, and then I'll point to you to this poet named David, who killed a lion and a bear with his frickin' hands, cut the penises off 200 Philistines just for shits and giggles. And led armies into battle.
Oh no, they wouldn't like that either. Nobody would like that. You know why, Doug? Because it's not nice.
Well, anyway, I think he's got some points here that are valid, but you can obviously see it's covered with effeminate sauce. And speaking about his championing of effeminacy, and I hate to bring the Bible into this, Rich, but I'm a Christian. It's not popular, but I am, and I do I do admit it. Santo Pablo, as we called him down in Miami, and as they call him that in Yuma and in Phoenix as well. He said in 1 Corinthians 6. He's got a whole list of obvious vices that forbids somebody from inheriting this thing called the kingdom of God. Sounds bad to me. And so it's got the adultery stuff. It's got homosexuality. And then it parses between homosexuality and effeminacy. And Paul said, do you not know that the effeminate shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Now, what does Paul know? Who is he?
Yeah.
And he finishes up that book in 1 Corinthians, Rich, by telling those dudes in the church in Corinth, he said, be strong, act like men, because they were acting like divisive little chicks. I'm of Paul, I'm of Apollos, I'm of Peter, I'm of Jesus. They're all full of division, pettiness. They were focusing on minutia. And Paul's pulls them to him. It's like, hey, can you stop this and act like a damn man?
Yep.
Thanks. Effeminacy is, and again, it has nothing to do, do you like to design clothes? Great, knock yourself out. Do you like to do poetry? Cool. There's some brilliant poets, from time immemorial. Are you a painter? Paint your ass off, man. That's great. Do you have to act effeminate in doing it? Absolutely not.
I would quote Giorgio Armani, who is a well-known professed homosexual, who said that he can't stand effeminate men.
Right. So did
I think it's interesting, huh?
I think Dolce and Gabbana also said the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's crazy coming from him. And what are you going to say to him? You know what I mean? You're going to tell him, well, you're just a homophobe. Nope.
Here's my thing with if you're gay and stuff. If you're going to be gay, okay, be a man about it. All right. That's all I'm asking. And I'm not homophobic. All right. So don't hit us with diatribes and start protesting us and stuff. I'm just chick-eccentric. And it's just the way I'm hardwired, man. I love the lady lumps, Rich, as they say. Hey, he also goes on, and we got to wrap it here pretty quick. How is dominance? If dominance? Let me phrase it this way, Rich. Dominance under the governance of Christ, and that's what sets us apart from the other, masculinity podcast.
Yeah,
is that the provider, protector, hunter, and hero motifs come under the governance of Christ in his example to men. So the first thing that God told man when he created him, and as man and women, male and female, is to steward the planet, to dominate the created order. Didn't say anything about abuse the crap out of it. It says rule it. Because if you don't rule your own life, if you don't rule your own bedroom, if you don't rule your marital relationship and keep idiots from coming in and ransacking it with bad opinion and bad influence, then you know what? I hope you like chaos. When God brought order, he brought rulership, and that entails this thing called stewardship and dominance over that which is in your realm. But dominate your bedroom, dominate,
That's right. And you know what? Here's the problem, Doug, is our society is becoming more and more effeminate. They're supporting effeminate men. They're becoming weaker and weaker and weaker. And so what they do is they decide that we are the problem. And I want to read something at the end of this article that I think is really, really right in line with what you're saying. He says, anyway, I don't know where it is, but it says this. He said that basically, if you take out these things from men, he said, then you'll find these negative, toxic, masculine characteristics. He said, if you remove those from men, you'll find that they're not much different than women. What
Hello.
the hell?
Right. Again,
Doug,
you know, women are great.
Jesus is the example. Jesus is the example. And who did they say Jesus was like? Some say you're Elijah.
Yeah.
Some say John. Two of the baddest dudes in the entire Bible.
Yeah,
two of the baddest, roughest, toughest, scariest, aggressive, bring it on, in your face, masculine times 10. And then, no, but you know what? Jesus actually the goal. Jesus died on the cross, Doug, and rose from the dead so that Christians could be nice. That's the goal. So people could be nice. Not that you could become Christ-like.
Who do people say that I am? Well, some say Sarah Jessica Parker. Some say Emma Stone. But I'm going with Courtney Cox. Yeah. Yep. Now that and you know, here's the thing that he brought up too. He said, you know, the more that men get into this toxic masculinity, Rich, the more that they won't show that they're vulnerable. Really. Not my captain. Christ showed his vulnerability in the garden. Christ showed his vulnerability with his disciples. I mean, he's passing off his he's passing off his power. He's telling them, hey, dudes, I'm weak. I got to go up to this freaking mountain and get focused for a little bit because you guys are draining the living snot out of me right now. He showed his vulnerability in the Garden of Gethsemane. David showed his vulnerability. Paul showed his vulnerability in Romans 7, like none of these numbnuts would ever show their vulnerability. The Achilles heel has always been part and parcel of the male archetype and the stories, again, from antiquity. I don't know what the hell he's talking about.
Yep, that's
Just
right.
because I don't cry over my vulnerabilities to some every dipstick that walks by.
That's right.
But I guarantee I'll tell Rich Whitmer my vulnerabilities.
That's what I was going to say. We'll take it and make it more personal. You and I have had very serious conversations, talked about trials, struggles, life, difficult things, been very vulnerable. I do that with my friends. I know you do that with your friends. My friends are some of the toughest guys that I know. They're very vulnerable about their lives and open about those things. And this thing about, they don't feel like they can share how they feel because they make them feel weaker. I call BS on that. I say you don't have good friends. Either you're not relational, you're probably sitting in the dark, rubbing your face, staring at a wall, and you're all depressed and whining and crying. Because people that are relational, tough guys that I know, they share their life with each other. They talk. Yep. We just don't walk around crying at the mall. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We talk about those things. So I call BS on that.
Yeah. Again, I think this thing is full of more holes than Rosie O'Donnell high stepping a barbed wire fence with pantyhose on.
Yes.
This is complete and utter bullshit. And listen, folks, especially dads, man, if you've got a son, this is what's coming. And I've said it a gazillion times. Rich has drummed it into people's heads also. If you want your son to grow up to be a man in the true classic sense of the word, avoid social media, avoid public schools, avoid Hollywood, and avoid evangelical branches in Catholic churches that are effeminate. Hey, Rich, before we close, you know why they have that 90-foot wall over the around the Vatican, don't you?
Why?
Well, originally it was constructed to keep Muslims out, which I won't bring up anymore. But secondly, I think it's there as an impediment to fathers who are trying to kill the priest inside the Vatican for squat humping their sons when they were altar boys.
Well, that just got way more real than what anybody wanted to hear in their whole entire life. Too bad.
Yeah. So, hey, Rich, what does the Warrior and Wild Men listener need to do?
Go to warriorsandwildmen.com. That's where it's happening. Go there, sign up, register. Follow us on the podcast. You can watch the videos. You can listen to it on audio, and let us know what you think. Rate us, review us, comment, send us. Tell us what you think, good or bad or otherwise. You know, give us your thoughts. Warriors and Wild Men.